This video breaks down one of the most fascinating contrasts in women's 400-meter racing. Two performances that show completely different paths to elite success, and more importantly, two completely different ways of understanding the event itself. On one side, we analyze a highly competitive race in Bydgoszcz, where tactics, pressure, and split-second decisions determined the outcome. This was not about one athlete dominating from the start, but about how the race unfolded in layers, how early aggression reshaped the entire structure of the field, and why only one runner managed to stay composed when everything around her began to collapse. We go deeper than just describing positions. You will see how the first 200 meters set the metabolic tone for the entire race, how certain athletes made the critical mistake of overcommitting too early, and how that decision impacted their mechanics in the final straight. We break down the key transition zone between 250 and 320 meters, where races are often won or lost, and explain why controlled acceleration is more effective than sudden surges. Most importantly, we focus on how race intelligence, not just raw speed, becomes the decisive factor when fatigue hits its peak. On the other side, we shift to Kingston and the performance of Sydney McLaughlin-Levrone, where the race dynamic was entirely different. Here, there was no tactical battle, no reacting to competitors, only precision, rhythm, and complete control over every phase of the race. We examine how she constructs her race model from the very first stride, how her hurdle spacing remains consistent under pressure, and why her technique allows her to conserve energy while maintaining maximum speed. This part of the analysis focuses on efficiency at the highest level.
Best form. Natalia Bukowiecka goes in lane 5 for Poland. Favourite, I guess it. Aguilar of Colombia in 6. Puerto Rican Scott in 7. Rowe of Australia 8. The Pole Gachka in lane 9 on the outside.
Set.
Well, Bukowiecka loves to run aggressively. Her season's best 50.9. She ran 48.9 last year at the London Diamond League. There she is in the all-red centre of picture. She's gone off pretty hard, moving up alongside Aguilar of Colombia. Urszatic has got a lot of work to do at the moment in lane 4. Going well, Scott of Puerto Rico out in lane 7. She eases past Gachka, the youngster, out in lane 9 in the yellow. But a nice balanced race from Bukowiecka so far. Brilliant running in lane 3 from Gale of Canada. What an aggressive 300 she's run so far. She hasn't broken 51 seconds this year, but she might have to here. Now she begins to tread water as Bukowiecka, who's judged this one perfectly, moves through in the red there in lane 5. Going away from the field, a real battle royal for the minor places. She wins it 50.45. Brilliant run from Lauren Gale, who just started treading water over the last 50 or 60. And then great running and a real battle for third place there towards the outer lanes. But what time has she been confirmed with? 50.44 there for Natalia Bukowiecka. It is a big season's best for her. She has run a second and a half quicker than that, so there's so much more to come. But that puts her up in about 15th place on the world rankings this year. Very, very competent indeed. You know, Hannah, one of the features of her racing is she runs beautifully balanced races. She stays strong down the home straight. And that skill of spreading your strength and ability throughout the full distance eludes so many athletes.
No, Bukowiecka, she's always reliable in that last 50 metres. That's a big chunk off her season's best. And she seems to measure the season well as well. It's not only each race, it's as we move through every month and you get closer to a big championships. She just rounds into form. And I think Bukowiecka was part of those relay squads for so long that were picking up medals. And then there was just a change in her attitude a couple of years ago. And she went, no, look, I can get my individual medals. And she almost had to take a step back from her relay commitments to kind of unleash that form and be able to get herself on global podiums. And she picked up a small injury indoors, if you remember as well. She was due to do a full...
25, which would be a shame. She's been a brilliant athlete her whole career and would be, or is enjoying being part of Grand Slam. Sian Salmon, decent draw for her in 7 years. She was 6th in the hurdle event. Just need to judge this right, the athletes. I think Sydney will certainly be able to do that. Sydney McLaughlin-Levrone, done this so many times, such a great exponent over all the sprints, never mind with there's hurdles in the way. Rochelle Clayton, 32-year-old Jamaican, has run a flat 400 already this year, in a fairly swift 52.3 thereabouts, not too far off that personal best you can see in the caption. Adrianette Knight, her teammate, similarly indoors for her though, 52.8. Normally you run quicker outdoors than indoors. So this is Peters of the Netherlands, a big part of the Dutch very successful 4x4 and mixed 4x4 squad that does so well at Olympics and Worlds. And then Cassandra Tate of the USA on the inside. Just might find the others moving away from her here, particularly I think with Peters in the lane 3. Just got held a little bit longer by the starter there, but they're away and gone. McLaughlin-Levrone already making up ground, and we've just had a pull-up from Rochelle Clayton, who's pulled up in the first 100 meters, maybe trying to hang on to the American, who knows. Going very quickly, Cassandra Tate, right on the inside, has started exceptionally quickly through the first 200 meters. But it's McLaughlin-Levrone out in lane 6, smoothly making their way around the top bend. Cassandra Tate, eyed on the inside, has run an excellent first 300, but is she going to pay for that as they come into the wind in the home straight? Sydney out on her own as we expected it to be, then it's going to be a real scrap for the minor places behind her. Tate is just starting to tread water in the home straight there, but it's Sydney McLaughlin-Levrone who's going to come through to make it 2 wins in the women's long hurdles. It's 50.32. Knight just took 2nd place.
The women's 400 meters has evolved into a discipline where 2 completely different models of excellence can coexist at the highest level, and the contrast between the race in Bydgoszcz and the performance in Kingston captures that reality with unusual clarity. What makes this comparison so compelling is not just the difference in results, but the difference in how those results were achieved, through race structure, pacing decisions, and the psychological demands placed on each athlete. In Bydgoszcz, the race dynamic was built on instability from the very first 120 meters. The early acceleration pattern from athletes like Svetlana Urszatic and Lauren Gale forced the field into a high-risk distribution model where the first half of the race was run closer to 200-meter intensity than to a controlled 400-meter rhythm. This immediately changed the metabolic profile of the race. Instead of a gradual lactate buildup, the athletes triggered early fatigue, meaning that the final 120 meters would not simply be about endurance, but about damage limitation and neuromuscular control under stress. Lauren Gale's approach is particularly important to analyze because it disrupted the expected hierarchy. By committing aggressively through 300 meters, she effectively removed the option for others to wait and kick. This kind of move often fails not because it is tactically wrong, but because it requires near-perfect energy distribution. In this case, the cost was visible in the final straight, where her stride frequency dropped and ground contact time increased, classic signs of deceleration under heavy lactate load. However, the value of her strategy lies in how it reshaped the race for everyone else, forcing even the most experienced runners into uncomfortable decision-making zones. This is where Natalia Bukowiecka's performance stands out as a case study in race intelligence. Her first 200 meters were not passive, but controlled within a clearly defined threshold. She avoided matching the early surge, which allowed her to preserve both mechanical efficiency and anaerobic capacity for the final phase. Between 250 and 320 meters, the critical transition zone in any 400-meter race, she began to increase pressure gradually rather than explosively. This detail is key because sudden acceleration in that phase often leads to immediate tightening. Bukowiecka instead built momentum progressively, which allowed her to maintain stride length while others were already shortening. The final 80 meters highlighted the difference between planned execution and reactive running. While the field entered visible deceleration, Bukowiecka maintained posture stability and arm mechanics, minimizing energy leakage. Her victory was not built on a dramatic closing burst, but on the absence of collapse. In high-level 400-meter racing, especially in early season conditions, this distinction often defines the winner. It was a performance rooted in discipline, where every phase of the race served a specific purpose within a larger structure. Now, when shifting to Kingston and the performance of Sydney McLaughlin-Levrone, the entire framework changes. Unlike Bydgoszcz, this was not a race shaped by collective interaction, but by individual execution at an almost isolated level of performance. Her 50-32 in the 400-meter hurdles represents not just speed, but an extraordinary level of rhythm control. In hurdles, rhythm is everything, and what separates McLaughlin-Levrone is her ability to maintain stride consistency between barriers without visible adjustment, even under fatigue. From the first hurdle, she established a pattern that removed uncertainty. There was no need to respond to external pressure because she created a gap almost immediately. This allowed her to run her own race model, where each segment between hurdles was pre-calculated in terms of stride count and velocity distribution. The absence of visible strain is not incidental, it is the result of technical efficiency. Her center of mass remains stable over each hurdle, reducing vertical oscillation and conserving forward momentum. Wind conditions in Kingston added another layer of complexity, particularly in the back straight, where athletes are most vulnerable to disruption. Yet McLaughlin-Levrone showed no deviation in rhythm, which suggests not just physical superiority, but also an advanced level of proprioceptive control. She does not react to the environment in the same way others do. Instead, she imposes her pattern on the race, regardless of external variables. The final 100 meters further emphasize this control. While most athletes in the 400-meter hurdles experience a breakdown in rhythm, often adding an extra step before the last barriers, she maintained her structure. This is where her flat 400-meter ability becomes decisive, because she can sustain speed even when the technical demands of hurdling are at their highest. There is no visible panic, no adjustment, only continuation. What connects these two performances is not similarity, but contrast. Bukowiecka succeeded by reading chaos and making optimal decisions within it. McLaughlin-Levrone succeeded by eliminating chaos entirely. One race demanded adaptation, the other demanded perfection. Together, they define the spectrum of elite 400-meter running in 2025. This duality is what makes the event so compelling right now. On one side, a deep and competitive field where races are decided by tactical nuance and resistance to fatigue. On the other, an athlete operating at a level where competition becomes secondary to execution. Both are equally valuable because they show that excellence in the 400 meters is no longer one-dimensional. It can be built through intelligence, through structure, or through absolute dominance. As the season progresses, the key question is whether these two worlds will collide more directly. If Bukowiecka and others continue to refine their race models, the gap may close in certain contexts. But for now, McLaughlin-Levrone remains in a category where the primary opponent is not the field, but the limits of the event itself